We have an announcement. XY Advisor is raising cash in an equity crowdfund held by Birchal. So you can find it at birchal.com/company/XY Advisor. If you'd like to own a piece of the social network moving forward, it'd be great to have you as an investor. All right, onto the podcast. Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast. To join a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice, head to xyadvisor.com. G'day, how's it going? What do you know? Strike a light, Clayton here from XY, and getting to chat with Jake, mate. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, pleasure.
Now, I heard some really good feedback that you did with one of the XY Plus digital events, a bit about budgeting. That was definitely a cornerstone of my offering, and I think understanding cash flow is sort of like the first step into that whole coaching world, so to speak. It was, strangely enough, if you go back even just, to the start of last decade, I guess it would have been, the concept of an advisor dealing with cash flow was kind of like, you did it to understand their insurance or maybe if they needed a mortgage, but it wasn't really something you charged for, but it's certainly flourished over time. I know Steve Crawford did a really good job in those early days. I sort of came up with a concept similar independently of him a little bit after. And then what's dawned on me is that many people have come up independently of their own ideas over time. And it's now, I guess, spoken about at a point in time where people are able to share what's happening. I've just become a father, and I just got Dylan actually to send me his budget calculator that he made up for like returning to work mums. And I'm like, yes, that's the exact kind of thing I need. So it's amazing to see sort of what is happening and what's happened with budgeting. And so I'm keen to get your ideas on what you spoke about in that XY Plus event, but also, how did you get here? And, I guess the broader sense, what's happening in COVID and all those good things. So let's start from the top. How did you get into this, you'd say, stage of your career where you're I guess, comfortable with budgeting and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So there's a turning point client of mine, and I won't mention the name obviously, but who came to me and they were just after some insurance, really basic stuff, but they had 180 grand in their offset account. They felt rich, but didn't feel like they were allowed to spend any money. So when the conversation of insurance premiums came up and how do we structure that, super, personal, etc., the conversation quickly came about the dollars and not the value of the insurance, no matter how many times I flipped the conversation around. And it got me asking the right questions about, you guys got all this cash sitting on your offset account. And they go, yeah. But if that ever gets below 180, we freak out. Or if that's above 200, we feel like we need to go on a holiday to spend the money. So their mindset was about this mysterious 180 figure that had no bearing on reality. So it got me thinking, we need to get more accountability. And one of the wife of the client, she actually did an accounting degree at university, but never practiced it. So she had a very textbook approach to, we just keep a whole heap of money. That's good, but doesn't really think how else that money could be using. In offset, fantastic. But the concept of multiple offset accounts, for example, does the same job, but gives us higher accountability on what the money is actually doing.
Yeah.
So that was the turning point. That's why I decided to even go down this avenue at all.
Yeah, interesting. Did you just learn on the job, or did you go anywhere for training?
Yeah, so it's this system. It's kind of a mashup of a whole stack of different people. So your big obvious ones are your Barefoot Scott Papes, Dave Ramsey. Kenneth Campbell more on the investment side. Your stuff even came in the mix.
Hey.
So So it was a big mashup of going, cool. Lots of people know something special about budgeting. It's not discounting any previous person who's had a view on budgeting, but of trying to make it as foolproof as possible that you could almost give it to any client and make something close to it work pretty quickly.
Yes. Awesome. So, yeah, I'm always interested by that story because I guess a similar situation where a client said to me once, yeah, I understand, Clayton, you can sort out investments, super insurance. He goes, but what can you do that makes my life better today? And I was like, that's a really good point. Like everything that I've just said, I'm like, how good is your future? And he's like, yeah, but and it was kind of interesting. So I went away and sort of thought about it for a while. And then, so that initial spark is always a very interesting concept. How have you found communicating your framework to existing clients and prospective clients? How have you found that?
Yeah, so I use the same framework for both sets of clients. So pretty much all I had to do was get really clear on my language and go, because the word buffer, the word float, the word emergency fund, they get thrown around a lot. And we've all got a different connotation based on who taught it to us in the first place, if we've even learned it in the first place. So I had to get really clear on my language. And as I laid out the strategy, which is what I did in the XY event the other week, but what I did with that is just purposefully went from left to right. This account does this account does that, et cetera, et cetera. But what the rules are for each account. And the whole point of the whole exercise of budgeting is not so that the advisor gets a higher ego or anything, because that's not how any advisor I know works. But it's all about empowering the client to make those trade-off discussions in the moment, real time.
Yes.
Yeah. So as soon as we can empower clients to do that, job's done. And then we can use something useful for insurances, for specific contributions, for all the stuff we want to do.
Yeah, it's a really good way of putting it. It's almost like the budgeting takes that random 180K. But that's only just for that client, because every client has their weird sort of equilibrium, right? Wherever it's 180, or if it's minus 180, right? Everyone's like wherever they think is a healthy point. And it's sort of saying, okay, well, you've got your sort of rudimentary view of what's normal and what where money should go. But actually, this is a better framework. And this is going to, rather than it being one set of money that does X, Y, Z, it's these 5 or 6 or 7 or 2 or 3 or whatever, how many sort of buckets or ways that you've separated or accounts, and you can allocate a certain importance or value to each of them. So for you, I'm sure you sort of went, okay, cool. There's a 180, but the 180 is an imaginary figure. What do you actually want to do with that money, and what money do you want to, like, rather than just, oh, we've made extra cash, so let's go blow it on this on this trip overseas. Well, do you really want to? Like, there's nothing to say that you have to go and spend that money, right? So I would have been a really interesting conversation to have, undoubtedly. And so when you're talking to a client, how do you get them to how do they see the value in what it is that you want to help them to achieve? I'm really interested in the sort of the communication of your service offering.
Yeah. Believe it or not, it's no different to any other financial advisor because it's goals based. So a goal could be holiday, it could be a new car, it could be whatever. But we frame, as financial advisors, we frame goals in terms of retirement and, all these things that we do, because that's just our world. But it's the same mental conversation to have for, we need to buy a new violin for Sally at school. It's the same conversation. Yeah. It just needs to be budgeted in the same way that we put regular contributions into investments or super. Same conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So you're sort of going through let's call it the fact find process, saying, okay, cool. Well, these goals can be achieved with budgeting services from myself, and these longer term can be achieved with investing services. And so you're sort of listening to the client and then saying, okay, well, I can help you achieve all of these with these different types of services. Is that basically it?
Yeah, you're getting really close. So it's the holistic nature of financial planning. I don't like using that word because it has different connotations as well. But when I say holistic, I mean if I move this lever, it's going to impact this thing as well. Yeah. So cash flow on insurances on estate planning, everything is interconnected. And that's just, so my meetings, believe it or not, I start the meeting talking about insurance, we'll finish with budgeting, or we'll start talking about super and we'll hit something else, but work out that's the more pressing goal that they're actually after today. And the next meeting we'll look at something else.
Interesting. Actually, where do you get the majority of your new client leads, if you want to call them that?
Yeah, a combination of social media, not that they're doing anything special on there, and referrals from those people from social media. Awesome. So I'm hitting probably the age early 30s to early 40s. They live on Instagram, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And there's these little communities. Happy for you guys to look them up as well. But debt-free community, FIRE community, which is financially independent, retire early, is what the acronym's there. All of these little subsects of people who might have completely different careers, like nothing to do with financial planning or anything like that, but their interest is about money, and they've researched things even deeper than I've researched things. So, and they just live on Instagram. They live in Facebook groups. That's their world.
Yeah.
So I just started playing in that bit.
That's awesome, mate. That's really cool. I undoubtedly you would have come across a bloke called Mr. Money Mustache.
Oh, yes, I have. I don't actively follow.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was one that back in the day, this is going back a few years now, but I remember the more that I was sort of getting into this cash flow piece, the more I'd sort of meet with people and they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm a Mr. Money Mustache. And I'm like, that is okay, well, that's an interesting, but these people wanted to retire by like 40. And I'm like, oh, I don't think that we're going to be able to work together, because that's probably a little bit too ambitious. Either that, or you're going to live a pretty like stoic lifestyle up until that. And then you're going to live a pretty stoic lifestyle after that. So I don't know. Maybe some people just really hate their job. I don't know, but it certainly wasn't something that I could connect with on an individual basis. But that makes sense. So the tools. What are the tools that you use to? Because I used to love sitting in the client meeting, and I used to have my own little sort of spreadsheet up there, and then I'd go through and I'd play around with the numbers, and then that was such a cool little immediate realization that that money goes down there, it comes out of somewhere else, and then that was so do you have your own self-built tools, or do you use tools that are already in existence? What do you do?
Yeah, so I do have tools, but I don't lead with them. So it's not so I don't like, and every advisor is completely different. I'm starting to realize this the more I chat to other advisors about it. Yeah. But I don't like to dangle shiny things in front of people. I like to empower them so they can do it themselves. And the example I think I gave the other week was, it's like Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig's, or those sort of done for you approaches to weight loss, where they kind of hold your hand a little too much, even though the system is brilliant. Most likely, I haven't researched those two. I'm not advocating or not, but they've kind of done a lot of the heavy lifting for you that you don't think about. Calories in, calories out. It's a point-based system, or it's whatever. Same with budgeting. Whatever system they've got, I temporarily take it off them and go, cool, let's go back to tin tacks, let's go to paper, and you fill out an old-fashioned line-by-line budget, not for this purpose of going, that belongs in that account or that whatever, more to get it on paper. Then I put it directly into, ASIC Money Smart have got their budgeting tool. Mm-hmm. It's pretty decent these days. They've updated it. I input the data into there, and it spits out a really pretty graph. So it does the job, but it says how much they're meant to be saving or how much they're going backwards. I use it just for their headline figure, just to bring that conversation around to, it says you should be saving 30 grand a year, but we've only got 10 grand in our account and we've been doing this for 4 years. So something's not right. So I use tech just to get to that point. Then I lay out the fact that, the structure that I like to run, it's old-fashioned bucket budgeting. Every bank account has a purpose. I believe your approach was pretty similar to that kind of concept.
Yep.
So once there's money in a certain account for a certain purpose, we're allowed to spend it for that predefined, pre-planned approach. Anything unexpected, we've got to tweak on the fly. But if we've already planned for it, we can spend it.
Yeah.
So we're taking away all of the thinking. And that's what I was saying earlier about the real-time trade-off discussion, because as advisors and accountants as well, we like to have that trade-off discussion with clients. It's how we're built. So, but to let clients in on that framework of thinking, if I spend money here, I have to take it from here if I don't already have enough money. Therefore, my Christmas holidays is not going to be as lavish because I really wanted to upgrade the car. You know, I'm being like picking silly examples, but that's the trade-off discussion we empower the husband and wife or the partners to have behind the scenes, not in front of an advisor.
Yeah, that's a great approach. In hindsight, I feel like my methodology was a little bit too hand-holdy, if that's the right term to use.
Sure.
I used to take it completely out of. The reason was like I really wanted the outcome. And so the outcomes that I was getting with clients were really good, but because they had no control over their cash, like their salary would go into an account that they basically couldn't touch. And then from there it would go to all the places that it needed to go. And then they would be able to spend what was allocated. And so the results that we got were really, really good. But in hindsight, and especially like the more conversations I've had with really good financial planners, it's more along the lines of what you're talking about and the way that you're doing it, which is you're co-creating the plan with the client, almost to the point where you're trying to get the client to come up with the plan.
Perfect. That's exactly right.
Yeah, because at that stage, when someone's so bought into when someone's so invested in the process that they've helped created, that there's just much more likely to implement it. And I would look at what the budgeting in financial planning was in the early 2010s. And it wasn't working because advisors were just sort of like making a budget and handing it to the client, and then the client just wasn't following it. And I thought the issue was we're putting too much into the hands of the client. So my thesis was, well, if we remove it from the client, then the chances of achieving it will go up. And that's true. It's true. However, I don't think there was enough buy-in in hindsight. And so probably the way that I'd approach it now is that whole co-creation, if not getting them to create it themselves. And then there's less, I guess, necessity for the advisor then to set up the accounts and to control how much is going into each and every account and things like that, which I was doing. And it was a nightmare. It was an audit nightmare, but it was just, the way that I decided to run it. And I think there is definitely a way to make that happen. And the advisor plays more of a guide role and
framework.
Yes. So have you found that is working for you?
Absolutely. Yep. So with the emergency fund, for example, that's the first account that I always start with. I place these little milestones for people who aren't used to the concept, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, 10. But a client I saw last night said, if I don't have 50 grand in that account, I won't sleep at night. And she's already had part of how her offset account works is you're capped at 50 grand for that particular one. You can have another one. So mentally for years, she's had this concept of there's 50 grand sitting there. So I said, totally, your emergency fund, which the job of the emergency fund is for pure emergencies. It's not to pay bills. It's not to pay a lot of other things. It's to replace cars if they break down. And that happened to me this week or last week rather. And it's to pay medical bills. It's to pay vet bills. It's to pay unexpected stuff, which are true emergencies by nature, that if you don't fix them now, we're going to have big problems. So that's the true emergency side of things. But the bills account can also become part of what we used to think of emergency or rainy day money, because it can also start providing for us for redundancies, for COVID, for, no one can plan COVID, but you can plan, and this is what a good income protection advice is we do plan that we're going to get injured at some point. We do plan that we're going to get ill, that we're off work for a certain amount of time. So we already do know that exists. And at the moment, advisor's first tool of choice as well is to use insurance for income protection, for example. We still do that, but sometimes because clients don't know their cash flow or don't feel comfortable with their cash flow, we go for a 30-day wait. For some clients, we can actually put that up to a 3-month wait, a 90-day wait, and because we self-fund that 3 months using our own money through bills.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Interestingly, I never actually did that strategy. The emergency account I would use, but it was always sort of the anticipation with the emergency account would be that it was going to get used on a big ticket item at some stage. And then we would sort of leave the rest in there. But I never actually, because that's actually not a bad idea to try and figure out a way to increase the wait period and thereby reduce the cost of the premiums, but still sort of have that long-term plan in place for insurance, was to use the emergency fund in the event an emergency occur, a medical emergency. I always thought of it in terms of it as exactly what we were talking about before, unexpected costs. Mm-hmm. But no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering why I didn't put 2 and 2 together. Isn't that that's financial advice though, isn't it? It's just, yes, of course. That makes a lot of sense. I remember because I'm in this new family position, I got no idea about family tax benefit, right? And I sort of asked on the platform, I was like, hey, family tax benefit. And there's a bunch of responses which have been great. And I didn't even know that it was a Centrelink thing. I literally thought it was somehow it was attached to the tax, right? Because it's got the word tax in it. So I've been learning, but there are definitely some interesting things there, especially around, if someone's sort of using a company with losses and it reduces your taxable income, I can definitely see some use cases there. So speaking of COVID, actually, what are you? We asked a question again on the platform the other day, and some really interesting data came out of that. For anyone that sort of answers the polls, you do actually get to see the results of the polls immediately. And one of the most interesting things that I saw was the highest response was that people were receiving more inbound attention now that COVID was on, and that there was a higher conversion rate. Mm-hmm. Now, that wasn't for everyone. It was only probably about a third of people, and there was a couple other options. But what have you found in terms of your advice business and advice process? Are you finding that you're getting more incoming or a high chance of conversion? Or what's your sense in the market right now with COVID? Yeah,
so the way I've been using the opportunity is more to frame it in line with our own mortality. Stuff happens, right? So I've been phrasing the estate planning conversation a lot more forefront, the insurance conversation a lot more forefront, and the cash flow a lot more forefront. So using the event like COVID, because I say, COVID was a 1 in 100 year pandemic, great. The other things that happen, like we have GFCs and we have tech booms and crashes and Y2K scares, and we've got, we can go through our history pretty reliably. September 11. We've got stuff in our history that will always somehow prop itself up. We have no idea what it is or when it is, but it will happen. Yeah. So it rephrases all the conversations to go, and this is my conservative nature, which I know we're not meant to overlay on clients, but but my conservative nature says, how do I protect you for next time? This one might be a little tricky. You might have lost your job, but how do we get you ready for the next one? Because there will be a next one. But I don't know what it is, when it is, or how it is. Yeah. So I've been, a lot of my inquiries to answer that part of the question, still through the social media route, which is great. But a lot of people are saying, I'm working from home. I can't just duck out and catch you, which I wasn't doing face-to-faces for a long period of time. So they said, can we do a nighttime Zoom or a before work Zoom? So 7 a.m. So I was pigeonhole, what's the expression? Both ends of the candle, just for Zoom meetings. So then the rest of the day was me working, but I was doing meetings at either side of the day and just feeling zonked, to be really honest, feeling empty by the end of it. It got me through, but yeah.
So, well, that's good to hear. In terms of you've found that COVID hasn't been a detriment to your business and to what you're doing?
No, I thought it would have been. Early days, I really thought it was going to be a huge detriment. But no, inquiries have kept coming in.
Yep.
And even the questions a lot of people are starting to say, oh, what about investments? Is now a good time to invest? Because I heard on the news, on the radio, some person down the street said that everything's low, so we should buy in. So again, reframe. I think this is what a lot of advisors do, right? We reframe what they've heard off the streets and put some actual strategy behind it. So I had one client come in and say, pretty similar to that 180K in offset. They had 120 in offset. And they said, I think the time's now that we dump it. We've heard about this debt recycling stuff. We want to dump the money from our offset account. We want to get really leveraged up into the market. We think now's the time. I said, but if COVID didn't happen, would you have the same conversation with me? And they're like, oh, no. We like having our buffers. We like having that money sitting there. I'm like, well, we wouldn't entertain it unless even we do a dollar cost averaging is almost still a little too risky based on that approach. It's just they go headline, oh yeah, we believe that. It was convincing enough and we should do something. But that's not what financial advice is.
Yeah, it's fun. I've always found it difficult to articulate that in a service offering. Mm-hmm. But how to stop people making dumb decisions is like one of just the most valuable things that financial planners do. The amount of times that you just go, no, let's not do that. And then, you've saved them a bunch of cash and a bunch of worry, right? Because it's not just because imagine if those clients had sort of said, yeah, we're going to do that. And then the market goes down 5%, right? But because they're leveraged, it goes down 10%. And then they freak out. And then they're like, oh my God, I would never go into the share market again. And it goes down. And it's like, oh, geez.
Been burnt once. Yep.
Yeah. And if you think about what the market has been doing, I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic and yet, and the market plummeted, but then it bounced back massively. And it's especially in the US, it's like crazy, right? And so what do? Do you look at what's going on around us and you go, well, it looks like there's an impending recession just because every shop is shut?
Yes.
Or do you just look at what exactly is happening on the stock market today? And oh man, I think people would be, to my mind, and again, I'm sort of conservative like you, which was always a struggle not to overlay that onto other people. but jumping into the market now and saying, oh, it's definitely time to the moon. I don't know. It's not. It's pretty tricky.
So I use the tool. So are you aware of the volatility index, the VIX?
The VIX, traded on the Chicago Stock Exchange, definitely.
Yeah. So the volatility index, I use that as a gauge of how silly people are being, basically. Lots of buying, lots of selling.
Yeah.
And there's no clear indication if it's a buyer's market or seller's market. So I use that and just bring it up on Google because I do a lot of Zoom meetings. So I just share my screen, pull up the VIX and show them and go, people are making a lot of silly decisions right now. Do you want to be one of them? I don't predict what the market's doing. I don't feel it's my job. There's one person, it might have been a Steve Crawford event, but somewhere down the track, I heard someone say the separation of budgeting, the separation of financial advice, and the separation of investment advice are three different things over in the States. So you have someone who you go to for investments, which is completely different to your Roth IRA account, which is different to your budgeting.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, I kind of feel like my skill set's not in the investments, except for the broad macro picture of being a financial advisor.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's pretty normal. I know some great advisors who wouldn't attach their value to investment philosophy. And then I know some great advisors that do. So
heavily on that side.
Yeah. They do sort of separate it a bit more in the US, but in Australia, we do definitely handle it more as a collective, but everyone has positives and negatives in their skill set. Are you walking more down the idea of coaching at the more that you get into the cash flow sort of thing, the mindset and being able to handle, sums of money in a positive way, and sort of improving that relationship to money on a personal level, because it's personal finance. Is that kind of where you're sort of taking your advice process?
Yeah, and it actually was the goal not too long ago. Before I joined Cobalt, I was actually trying to do money coaching exclusively without the financial planning badge. And I found I just was not getting the leads. The social media was the same, my interaction, everything was the same, but I couldn't say I was a financial advisor for that period of time.
Wow. And
as soon as I flicked the switch and I told my socials, I've just joined on with, I didn't mention Cobalt, but it wouldn't make a difference to them. But I've just joined on with these guys. I can give advice again in your more complex stuff, your insurances, your super. The very first question was, are you still doing the cash flow piece? Are you still doing this budgeting thing? Because we really need a lot of help on that. I've been here, guys. Hey. So I found that to be able to give that advice, I needed to be an advisor just from the public perspective for the minute. And that minute might be for the next 10 years. But my ultimate goal is to help people in this space. I've got very little interest in specializing in high net wealth or one particular thing which a lot of planners build their bread and butter on because they're a reliable client, et cetera, et cetera. My passion, which is counterintuitive, is helping people look after their money. Not the people with no money, because Steve Salvia says you've got to pick clients who can pay you, which is great. But so I don't want people with no money, but I want people who don't know how to manage their money. They're the fun clients, because as soon as pennies start to drop, figuratively and literally, they start to get really excited again about money. Money's not just a means to an ends, or I work Monday to Friday. It actually starts to do something really tangibly. Yeah,
that's a really, really, really good point. Yeah, you want to work with people that do find it interesting, like the work that you're doing for them, and you can connect with and enjoy the work that you do is very important. I'm interested to hear. Actually, first and foremost, I'm stoked to hear that the fact that you're a financial planner was seen as a positive to the people that you've been speaking to for a long time. That to me is fantastic news. I'm really, really happy to hear that there's still weight attached to that term and that it hasn't been completely destroyed and eroded over time. That's fantastic. I'm super glad to hear that. Then I'm interested to hear of what you've found different in your licensee now that you didn't have beforehand, because this is a licensee run by Connell, correct?
Yeah, it is. Yep, Ben and Connell. Yep.
Yeah, and he's obviously a very intelligent guy. He's very good with a bunch of things. So I'm interested to hear what kind of support, what are you finding from a licensee like that?
Yeah, so a lot of the help that they've given wasn't on the budgeting piece, it was on the everything else. So with our CPD points, for example, we go through Think Caddy, and we can pick up podcasts from XY. Like, it's just next level thinking, right?
Yeah.
It's just common sense. It's a phrase that Connell and Ben both love, is that common sense stuff when it comes to running the AFSL. So the compliance goes down the exact same route of, let's make this as common sense to an advisor as possible, but also let's protect ourselves like crazy. Yep. So we do have proper procedures and policies and documents that, have been created, but it was created out of making sure the advisor can actually do the thing as well as look after it. So that's been a lot of their support. I was actually their first advisor they brought on apart from themselves. So I was one of their foundation advisors, which is pretty cool. So when I started, they didn't have formal policies, but that grew over time, which is obviously how most businesses work. But their approach to researching it, both Connell and Ben, I'm giving them a lot of praise today. This is awesome. Both of them are very heavily researched and know the answers themselves. It's just not where they should be spending their time when you could outsource to a compliance professional who can work in with you. So obviously they are both practicing advisors as well. The concept was actually they became self-licensed for their own business and then decided to bring on other advisors.
Yes.
And that helped bring the protection behind the AFSL as well.
Because when I was with my company, it was with a large license. It was with, and there were people in that licensee that I liked as people, but I wouldn't say that I really learnt a lot from being in a licensee like that. Are you finding, because the licensee is run by practicing advisors,
totally,
that you're getting a more of that sort of advisor to advisor peer-to-peer learning?
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd be very well aware that we've got our own group on XY now, private group. And we're not using it literally every day, but we're using it to dump video of explanations on how to use advisor logic better, or we're using it to have a bit more conversation around some stuff.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a message board, because we had our, so we started doing some regular monthly meetings with all the advisors joining a Zoom call. And one of the things on it was, can we have like a discussion board or somewhere that we can pop requests up so that by the time we get to next month's meeting, we've got some agenda items. And then literally after that, Connell or somebody had a brain spark or was talking to one of you guys and they're like, let's have our own group. And from there, that's how we're starting to use it.
Right. That's really interesting. Yeah. It's, for us, it's been amazing because we see, I guess, all of the private and secret groups as well, that have been coming out. It's amazing to see because literally we have no idea what advisors are going to find the most helpful and the most valuable. We've got no idea. We've never known. Like 7 years in, we've never known, and we're like, "Whoa, that's weird." Okay, we'll do that. And so we still approach things with the exact same, but looking at the way that you guys are using it, I'm sort of like, interesting. So it's less to do about, because you guys aren't using it to acquire new. When I say you guys, like Cobalt's not using it to acquire new people into the platform or into their licensee, but it's a way to share information. So it really is that peer-to-peer learning, which I think, it makes the most sense. So we'll see where it goes, like it may, we have no idea where this thing's headed. So I'm just glad that you guys are finding it useful. Mate, so the last thing I just want to finish up on is, how do you feel about the future of advice? What's your sense check? Like with all the changes that have occurred over sort of the last, decade or so, and where you are now, how do you feel about being a financial planner for the next sort of 2 years, 5, 10 years kind of thing?
Yeah. Super confident, not just for myself, but as the whole industry matures is the word I've been using, matures into a profession. We have our roots, you know this really well. We have our roots in sales, but it wasn't our generation that did that. But our compliance system was all built around sales. So now that we're starting to think client-centric, which is how our generation thinks, we do think very client-centric. Now the legislation's caught up and gone a little too far in a couple of respects.
Sure.
But that's totally fine. We're maturing. We're growing up to becoming the same as the law of the legal industry, the same as the medical, the same as the accounting. We're just leveling up and joining the conversation properly. Yeah.
Mate, that's such a great way of thinking about it. That's awesome. Mate, as I mentioned, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate both, walking sort of the XY Plus members through that really handheld and budgeting. But also I wanted to hear a little bit more about the background on that story and see where it's come from or where you're headed. And thank you very much for sharing.
Pleasure. Loved it. Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers, mate.